Hi, everybody. My name is Matthew Osach, and I am the VP of SEO at Getty Images and iStock. Please note, I can't see your chat while we're going here right now, but if you want to leave some questions in the chat in the Q&A section, I'm happy to answer them at the end of the session today. So I'll be addressing how imagery fits into a content strategy for organic traffic growth. And I wanted to talk a little bit about myself so you get to know me a little bit better before we get into the topic here. So I'm based out of the New Jersey, New York area. And it's really a pleasure to be here speaking with you today with the Digital Marketing League and the team at Textbroker. We're going to talk about the value that images can add to the content strategy and how they're going to help you organically grow traffic to your website. I've been in digital marketing for over 18 years, and I generically have specialized in search engine optimization for almost the entire time. But in SEO, you can't stop touching other things about a website. I used to be, by trade, I was originally a developer, designer, front end, back end, database administrator, and your generic webmaster of the early 2000s. I was handling a lot of different parts and pieces of the web and got into a lot more marketing side than the programming side and moved into SEO shortly thereafter. I've switched back and forth in my career between agency work and brand side. I've worked with agencies at Rosetta, Razorfish, and Publicis Sapient. And then I've also worked client side with finance, e-commerce, pharma, automotive, as well as working in-house at PC Mag, Mashable, What to Expect When Expecting, and now Getty Images and iStock. So a little bit about Getty Images and iStock, if you're not familiar with those two companies. Um, the Getty Images Network is one of the world's largest creators and distributors of award-winning still imagery, videos, and multimedia products, as well as other forms of premium digital content that you may be familiar with seeing on TV, on the internet, on websites, on presentations, and whatnot. And they're brought to you through two of our major websites, gettyimages.com and istockphoto.com. With our advanced search and image recognition technology, Getty Images houses over 400 million assets and represents over 320,000 of the world's top creators. We serve more than 1 million customers in over 100 countries. And we preserve the history with our archives. We document the world as it is today and authentically represent the world as it evolves. Our best in class photographers and imagery help customers to produce inspiring work which appear every day in the world's most influential newspapers, magazines, advertising campaigns, films, television programs, books, and online media. So we are truly moving the world with images every day. So a little bit about the agenda that I'm going to go through today. We're going to talk about why SEOs should care about images. We're going to talk a little bit about if Google said or didn't say why you should use stock photos, what images unlock, and how to optimize images for more visibility and traffic. Then we'll go into a little bit of the Q&A. And of course, I'd like to apologize for the landscaper who just happens to show up right when I'm starting my presentation. So why we care about images in SEO? Well, first let's understand why we'd want to care about this as an SEO, right? You'd think about content on the page, you think about engagement, you think about what bots want, but on average, on a web page, users have time to read at most 28% of the words during an average visit, more like maybe 20%. This was a study by the Nielsen Norman Group. They were finding that individuals were rapidly viewing the material, looking at headers, looking at some snippets of material, depending on how long the asset was or the article was, but they would be able to absorb the imagery. And then another noted speaker and specialist at SEO in the industry and a columnist that uses imagery all the time, the images make it easier to read. They make an article easier to read. Not only do they give people a rest, they allow me to connect with on a different level. Sometimes I might be able to communicate an idea better with the help of that image. It helps to make it all click. That's from AJ Cohen. If you're in the SEO industry, you might know him as Blind 5-Year-Old. He seems to get on the radar of a lot of the SEOs at Google, the individuals that communicate out SEO information at Google. He was kind enough to provide that quote to me today, and he's written an article about the value of imagery and communicating ideas and SEO as well on his website if you'd like to visit that. So why else do we care about images in SEO? Well, we're constantly trying to do what's right for the user. We're also trying to sneak in our own special tweaks and implementations, whether they're visible to the user or not. And we do this in order to gain a competitive advantage in organic search rankings and to drive more traffic to the page. All of this while not undoing the influential content that others have created or our product teams have prioritized. We certainly want to engage the visitor by increasing their time on the site and decreasing bounce rate. We in the SEO world think of it as pogo sticking. We don't want someone to go to a search result, click to our website or web page, and then go back to the search result. We want to keep them there. We don't want to give that signal back to Google that we may not be a quality page. It does help tell a story. Images and the right image can help users better understand written content and break up the large blocks of text. It can also create an emotional connection with the content or the brand. There's a stylization that you've seen all day today to all of the presentations and the design and the colors and the layouts. You want to keep that associated with your brand. And if there's a stylization you look for, you want to find the tools and services and images that appear best for your brand. But for the SEOs, it opens doors to more visibility and traffic. That should be one of the biggest reasons why we as SEOs would be interested in adding imagery to our assets or our web pages. Um, Images occupy the high value real estate on search engine result pages, or what we call the SERP, and they are frequently above organic results and above the page fold. They're what we now start to consider in position zero. Furthermore, there is a heavy market share, as of a study that JumpShot and SparkToro participated in Q2 of 2019. There's a heavy market share that Google has as a property, where its search results, of course, take up about 69 of the searches in the search engine market share. But Google image search also takes up about 20% of the market share of searches on the internet. A really amazing number. They also say that a majority of those image searches now are on mobile devices. And that's why page speed and asset size is also going to come into a factor in just a little bit. All right. So wait a second, Matt. I've read that SEO is dead. I've also read that Google said that you shouldn't use stock photos. I've heard that stock photos are a bad idea. Well, let's go to the source. That is a little bit of an old wives' tale, right? So in June 2020, this year, John Mueller responded when asked if stock images affect rankings. And while we all try not to read into too much of what John says, I'll take it just word for word. It doesn't matter for web search directly. For image search, if it's the same image as used in many places, it'll be harder. And I completely support that concept. We need to use authentic imagery where it makes sense the most. But no, stock photos are not a negative in SEO. However, it will make trying to rank for image search more difficult, not for web search. I thought that was really telling for the industry. I have to say that as an SEO that just got into the Getty and iStock team, I've only been with iStock and Getty for about 10 months now. I joined in December of last year. I was also suspect before hearing this information about stock photos. I know that the same image repeated over and over on other websites or assets could possibly not rank or be as well understood by Google for the exact same image. But for the content around that image, that certainly is not the case. You are judged by the content and not just the single image that you may have seen utilized once before somewhere else. All right. So now that we've got the Google debate out of the way, let's explore what using images on the web unlocks for content owners. The most important thing to know is that more and more, Google is putting your content on its search engine result page. Over the years, these features have exposed content and imagery from sites, but also helping improve the click-through rate to your site if you're fortunate enough to earn one of these very valuable positions with your rich result. Many of which require you to have an image. needs to be declared as a primary image or some sort of image header or hero in the code underneath. It has to be in an article, in a web page, or in other structured data. Furthermore, users click on rich results 58% of the time compared to a click-through rate of 41% for non-rich results on page one. For all of the data and the materials that you hear me talking about today in the studies, I've included links or references in my slides along either the bottom or at the end. And when you receive this material, or if you'd like to get it from me personally, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to give it to you. I'm happy to provide you with all those sources. Images are a required element for Google Discovery, Google News articles, AMP articles, and many other features or rich results. They can't be ignored. The feature snippet occurs in the top 20 search results 7% of the time. The knowledge panel, which contains at least 6 or 7 images, appears about 28% of the time. Top stories appear about 5.8% of the time. Then we go into other features, a carousel, or the image pack or image search. Image packs appear now 43% of the time in search results. So if you're looking to get into the featured snippet, an image pack, news or top stories, if you have a Google Pixel or you have a Chrome browser on your phone, when you open that up by default and you don't have a starting place that you're going to just yet, Google Discovery is providing you with articles that you may have an affinity want to read based on your previous search history. And then of course knowledge panel pieces. So when do you use images? When is it right to use images? Well, in my perspective as a digital marketer, pretty much all the time. But in case you're unsure, here are some considerations to have. How relevant is having a visual to the content of the article? Think about what you're writing about, what has been written. Think about how a visual could add to the presence or the experience that a user will have when they get to the page. Will it help them to engage with the brand more? Is it an infographic? Is it some other piece of information? And also, what happens in Google search today for your target keyword? What is this article about? Let me go search about it. Is it important for me to have a visual asset or many visual assets attached to this page to make it rank better or stand out more or have a rich result? Is there an image pack? Do you see news items or top stories? Are there any kind of rich results? Those are the questions I would ask myself before I make the commitment to have to get imagery for a certain article or topic. A common mistake that I have seen in past companies I've worked for or with is that they prioritize listicles or list articles to be slideshow-like pagination. If you're looking just to get ad impressions on a link from a Facebook article that you're trying to get to go viral, maybe it's about entertainment news and it's about the top 20 images of a red carpet event, getting ad impressions may be good for you. If you're an editorial website, that's what your goal may be. However, if you want other results, like something from SEO, an SEO-driven traffic piece or channel of visitor, you're not going to want to create these paginated pieces with thin words and content leading to page after page after page. I have found in my experience by moving from a slideshow pagination of a listicle or article to a long form article with multiple images with contextual relevance around them, that performs better in SEO. I've seen turnarounds on those type of page templates where if you apply this change to the template, where it goes from listicle and multiple pages to a longer form page, more contextual relevance and additional value in content, that I see in about 3 months, those articles really take off. Okay, so I've convinced you now, I'm sure. You've decided to use images. That's great. How do you optimize them? Well, here is a starting beginner's checklist. First, you must be providing good context around your image. You will go nowhere if you do not provide good context. Google has stated in almost every presentation in the last couple of years about image search is that it needs to understand the context around the image. Images must relate to the written content on the page and vice versa. You want to place the images near text that's relevant to that image to give it relevance. Google can scan an image, but it still needs contextual relevance and cues from the content to understand it. That is something that Google itself says. Here is a little bit of your checklist. These are a little more technical. All right. Place images in the image tag. All right. Place images in the image tag. Having them in cascading style sheets or backgrounds of divs does not work. You want to also make sure that you have an image file name properly. The alternate text is something you want to make sure you absolutely do. It's the text that sits underneath when you mouse over an image and that image little text bubble pops up. That is very valuable to Google. They've said that themselves. You want to make sure you don't have your images in carousels or slideshows. You should really go toward a grid view or a long form article. The HTML caption element, another very valuable piece of information. And then anchor text. This is especially relevant for downloading infographics, charts, or diagrams. Now, really what you want to happen here is when an infographic chart or diagram is there, you want it to be found on a web page. You don't want it to be directly downloaded, and you certainly don't want to link out to PDFs as a solution for something. You usually lose your analytics, and you don't want that to happen if those PDFs or images start ranking directly into search results. You want an interstitial buffer there. But anchor text leading to that page that talks about being able to download the infographic charts or diagrams is a very valuable solution there. Here's a little bit more about what you should do to optimize some images, a little more advanced perspective. Use the open graph tag or schema markup for an image object in the code underneath the page. This is usually something that is a little outside of your standard content management system. But it's possible that your developers could add these kind of fields for you, or you could ask for them to be built in. Don't embed important text inside of images. While Google can maybe read the words on that image, it may not associate those words to the image or to your content. It is just Google. This is a Google recommendation itself. Just flat out, don't embed important text inside of an image. Lazy load image assets that are below the fold. So you heard me talk a little bit about speed. If you have a whole bunch of images that are below the fold of the page and can cause the page to load a little bit slower, or they're not in the right image compression or size, they can certainly slow down the experience for the users, and that can slow down Google's own impression of the page, and it won't get you ranked as well. I just said it, image compression and size utilization. Size utilization is a very interesting piece here. You don't upload an image that is 2000 by 3000 pixels for a spot that's only going to inhabit about 600 by 800 pixels. You certainly don't want to do that. That means that your browser and the web server is sending a file that's much larger to someone than what they need. And it's going to slow down their needs. It's going to slow down their experience on your page and the load time of that page. That's one of the biggest mistakes we see a lot of people do. They upload a raw image size and they don't resize it to only what the browser needs. And then an image sitemap. Hopefully, if you're using a CMS, it's able to identify and store all of the images that you've uploaded and you've used in your articles or your pages. It can then run through and create an image sitemap with links out to Google, and Google can find that sitemap to find all of your images. Certainly one of the most important things that I do here at Getty. All right. So we're going to go ahead and take some questions from the audience. I'm going to let you guys sit back and kind of process some of that information first. Um, I'm happy to take any questions, whether it be about image optimization or search or this checklist, some of the best practices about SEO and what it has to do with the different things that we're doing today in the industry. I certainly am no stranger to the opportunity that this conversation brings about talking about SEO to the general public. I've been in SEO for over 18 years. I've dealt with multiple different kinds of websites and strategies, whether they be large or small. Um, Currently, I'm working on a website with Getty and iStock that's about 128 million pages large, and with a keyword target of "Go get your dictionary." Uh, so that's the kind of SEO challenge that I have on a daily basis, and I'm happy to provide any kind of analysis or feedback to anybody.
Great, thank you, Matt, so much. I think I know the earlier presentations focused on backlinks and kind of more of the data. So to me, it's really nice to see how image and just as another asset to SEO, and something that's kind of moving forward more and more as the years go by, as Google focus on user experience, like you touched on, and stuff like that. So I have some questions that I want to ask you, but I know Laura just put a question in the chat that I want to get to right away. And it says, we talked a lot about images. Can you share a little bit about video, and how would using video affect SEO versus using photos?
Sure. So there are certain unique properties to video that you can utilize. Some of the best are the freeze frame images in the OG video tagging, and taking snapshots of your own. Image video Image and video kind of live together in similar spaces where there's a lot of encroachment from Google features in the SERP. You can see YouTube videos pretty often. You don't see as many Vimeo videos as you used to. But you want to make sure that you do a couple different things depending on the value that you think this video has, either on your web page or your website. So I think more as a general marketer at times than just an SEO. If you're trying to optimize your own website and your web page for video, certainly having contextual cues, not just the title of the video and who the speaker was and the date and time, but having a full transcript of that video would be extremely helpful. Breaking that video down into subparts with H2s or H3s, talking about different sections of that video and the main talking points or questions that it answers, would be very valuable as well. The video player itself, there are generic video players and video schema markup that Google says help it to identify videos, and I recommend you go out to schema.org to look those up. But keep in mind that Google loves presenting its own features in Google search results. If your website domain or that page does not have a lot of authority, a lot of backlinks, you may be better off, if you feel comfortable doing so, placing that video up on YouTube. Having a lot of contextual relevance also in the description of that video, and providing, of course, links off to your own website or the page that video is on your website, and making sure that that channel is dedicated toward your business. And there's other related videos that someone might be able to find for it. I think that those are two of the best things you can do with videos to make sure that you want to ensure visibility for your company, your brand, and its intent about video search. It can be a challenge, believe me. If you are strapped and not able to get yourself to sit down and write a transcript of the video that is maybe like 20, 30 or longer, 20, 30 minutes or longer, when you upload it to YouTube, there's an automatic transcript creator. And you can go and copy all of that transcript, and maybe you need to do a little bit of parsing once it's come down from there, because the machine learning system is only so good, right? But I think that you could bring it down, a little bit of a cheat, put it into your page, make sure you read through it first, and then you've got some good value there.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's really good pointers right there. Philip, I'll let you get into it here in a second. I just had a question, just because I've experienced it myself, with, you look at the ranking factors, and it seems like lately page speed, right? Load speed has been a key ranking factor when you go to Webmaster Tools, and it's there. And I know you touched on it briefly, but when you go into Getty or iStock, right, you can download the image as the raw image and the different sizes and stuff like that. I just want to know, maybe if you could go in a little bit more detail on how to implement these images just so it's optimized for the page, like you were saying, so that load time is up there. So as a ranking factor, you're getting a boost from not only the user experience with the image, but also the load time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Getty and iStock tools have an editor on the website that you can resize and crop the materials before you download the final product. Of course, that is a free editor if you're buying the image that anybody can use, which is terrific. But there are also at-home image editors where you can resize the image, make it a lot smaller and compressed. Let's say that you're going really homegrown on this. Let's say that you really don't have an editor, you don't have Photoshop, you don't know what you're doing with all those other editors. You can go the way that I do sometimes, which is probably not always the most recommended way, because you'll lose the image metadata, which is very valuable to Google as well. But sometimes you could take that image, put it into PowerPoint, resize it there, and then use like a screen cropping tool or a screen grabbing tool and save that file in the smallest possible size that you want it to be. Now, you're not going to get it exactly to match the size you expect it to be for your web. But you do want to make sure that it's at least a little bit bigger than the intended size that it's going to go up on the web for, because you don't want it to have to scale out. You want it to have to scale it down. But if you can keep the image in its most raw format and use an image formatter that allows you to rescale and resize that image properly, that is really the best way to do it. Google utilizes the file properties of the images that you have. So imagine back in the day when you used to be able to right click on files, and you still can. You right click on files, you look at the property of the file, there's the date it was created. There's a lot of that data in imagery now that is set up by the companies like mine and other contributors that upload their images to our platforms. And we want to make sure that that is persistent there. So I would recommend that you try and keep the original file as best you can. For sizing and for image and speed, if you have multiple images on the page, you want to speak to your developers about lazy loading, making sure that those images that are below the fold are not as big and heavy and maybe load after the pages come up. But you'll also want to have mobile friendly pages. So you'll want to have what we call a responsive design. There should be an image size for desktop, and there should be an image, a completely different file perhaps, for mobile visitors. So that when a mobile visitor and Google's mobile bot hits that page, it sees the difference in the page load, the speed, and the size of that file, and it can give your page more of a priority. As you may have heard in the industry, the mobile first index is coming. Uh, for us, a lot of us in the industry, we've already been moved over or notified by Google that we've gone mobile first. But so we think we've already felt the impact. We're not 100% sure, but we don't know if it's going to be mobile getting like it was a couple of years ago. We know that that was a thing for us, a bunch of us at least. We wanted to beat that stopwatch that was kind of going. But now we think that in the next couple of months we're better prepared. Another way to do image optimization, if you're really techie and you know what you're doing, is to use a more compressed version of the image. By default, services like iStock and Getty will provide you with the most high resolution ability to download an image. You can select from the different large, small, medium, large, extra large sizes, but we'll give you a really high resolution image. Maybe that's not what you need. Maybe you only need a resolution image that's a lot lower. You can use some of those those editors, those image editors, to do compressions to those images. Or you can go even and take it from a normal JPEG file and put it into what's now called a WebP image file. Those are even a higher compressed version of an image. Maybe you're not looking for a really high quality, really sharp image. You just need something that's compressed and it's fine. It's not going to pixelate too much if you go to WebP or a compressed JPEG. I recommend doing that as well if you've got somebody that has the capability and tool set to do so.
Cool. I think that, yeah, I think that's very, very useful. Like I said, I ran into that a while back using just our own WordPress site and with the images and the size and the resolution. So I think that's great.
Yeah, happens to all of us.
Matt, I thought you had an interesting slide just showing in the entire universe of search, right? How many searches are Google, and then, I think it was 60-something%, and then it was another 20% that was Google image search, right? And I think when most people think about SEO, they're thinking about getting listed in the kind of the first part of the Google results, kind of the normal results, not so much the image side, But given how many people are doing image searches, in a sense, maybe, right, it's a secondary or a backhand way to get your site in front of people, to make sure you show up for the right keywords. I mean, how should people, I know you showed the stat that said, as you'd imagine, stock photos probably are not going to be great for you in terms of getting ranked high in image search unless there's just not a lot of competition. But how should people think about that? How should they think about it with original photos? How should they think about it with stock photos?
Sure. So you're certainly going to have a tough time, like the Google representative John Mueller had said, if you're trying to rank using a stock image. But you'll probably have an easier time if you've got great content around it. If you've got great material around your content strategy, you may have more contextual relevance to that article and the image that it represents in search results. It's certainly something that can happen for anyone. It doesn't have to just be the original owner of where that image came from, like an iStock or a Getty. What we are also seeing in image search are some new features that are available that help out the industry a little bit. You can now find commercially accessible images using the licensable badge that Google recently launched. If you are looking to buy images or something like that, or make sure that your image that you're using, if you want to do a reverse lookup where it's used, where it's been utilized before, you can take a look at that. But there are product listings in Google image search. Google knows that people are looking for things within Google search, image search, to buy them. And so you can see products there that are chairs and tables and furniture and wallpaper and a whole myriad of things that you may not have expected to see, or people actually get into searching for. Certainly, if you're like me, yeah, I have 2 kids. And every so often, I'm looking up the random unicorn picture, right? I'm showing my daughter something for a bedtime story. They want to see a picture of the, Goldilocks and the 3 bears. So you've got your looky-loos. You've got your people that are not in the customer journey of purchase intent. But you certainly do have a good percentage of those individuals that have purchase intent, that, like my wife, maybe during the pandemic, you were looking to buy outdoor furniture, or get ideas about that furniture, or settings in design and landscape. There are a bunch of verticals today that can be better served through an image search because of the emotional attachment or the immediate recognition of what that person's looking for, rather than in a web search. And mobile is a great way to do it now that speeds are getting faster on mobile. While Google certainly wants you to be faster for a mobile experience, it certainly helps you to have a more efficient page speed for it. But there's a lot of different use cases for Google image search, and a lot of, I think the number earlier in the stat was 43% of searches generate an image pack or an image of some kind in a search result. Holy crap. That's huge. I mean, that's almost half. That really should tell you why, when you're writing great content or you have content created for you, you should be adding images to that material, because it captures the attention of the individual and it gets a higher click-through rate. 58% of those individuals click on an image-based or some sort of a visually based rich result, rather than just a regular web result when both are present. So I find a lot of value in Google image search, especially, of course, as Getty Images and iStock. If people are looking for puppy pictures, dog pictures, cat pictures, but then they're able to filter to the ability to buy an image like that, it's very valuable to us, and it should be valuable to others in multiple industries.
Cool. I have a question. It may be a simple answer, but I don't know the answer to it, so I wanted to bring it up. Just in terms of content, Google has said repeatedly, like, duplicate content's a bad idea. Like, just don't do it. With images, I'm assuming it's the same story, right? You don't want to have the same image on every single page of your website. It's probably better to diversify. You want to kind of speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, I think we can go back to the quote from John Mueller to say, having the same image as others or other web pages is probably not going to diminish your web rankings. It's certainly not going to set you apart. It's certainly not going to create additional value. And they do admit to being able to know what is on that image. We don't know what part of the algorithm weights what Google found in the image and what is on the page and the words around it. but obviously there is some sort of a mix in that machine learning or AI that they've done with their image recognition services and software. Every day we see articles that are published and that are having unique materials. I think it's easy enough to go out and get. There's so many resources, whether they be low cost, mid cost, or free at times, that you can go to get an image that is unique that you'd like to use. A lot of tools out there that provide images have the ability to look at what's newest or what is most commonly used. If you reverse some of those features, we have that feature on iStock, you can either see newest images, so maybe people haven't used those images before that you want to download and utilize for your article, or you can look at the most popular, which might be the things that match closest to what you're looking for, but may be popular because they were viewed the most or downloaded. I couldn't really give a very good example on that specific line of thinking, but certainly by having a unique image on every article or every page that you have, you're changing the dynamic and the look and feel of your web page. And I think that that's very valuable as having been a web developer and a surfer of the internet. I want a unique experience. I want something that adds value to my experience as a visitor to the page.
And I think one of the things we know about written content, and maybe other forms of content, I guess, but right, freshness is a ranking factor, right? And so there's, we see this from Textbroker clients, right? There's kind of this decision, well, I've either done it myself or I've paid someone like Textbroker to write, thousands of articles. So I've got all these assets, but, it's now 3, 4, 5 years later, some of this stuff is getting stale. One of the things we always recommend is kind of refreshing as opposed to having to start from scratch. Especially if you still feel like that, the bulk of the content on that page is pretty good. Hey, just add a new first paragraph or update some things, and you don't have to pay for a brand new thing. And I have no idea what the answer to this. I don't know if you know this. What about on the image side, right? So if you've created this web page that's now 5 years old, it's kind of been out there for a while. You see the rankings kind of drop because there's people on the same keyword that are creating newer stuff and Google's rewarding them for that. So it's like, all right, it's time for me to refresh this page. Can you just leave the image you had from 5 years ago? Is that not a problem? Google's not considering that? Or you need to maybe update that image as well? Is that something you know?
Yeah, I think I'd start with research around that to see what my Google image search clicks and impressions are for either that particular page or that image. You go to Google Search Console, you take a look at the URL for that article, and you see how it's performing in image search or if it's gotten any image clicks for that image. If it's underperforming, if it's not getting any clicks at all, or it's been diminishing a lot over time, I'd probably look to refresh that image as well. We believe in the industry that Google has a memory for the footprint of a look and a feel of a particular image, that it knows what one image and another image and another image, that it's all similar because the pixels and the colors and the locations and the file sizes and the metadata all line up to each other, and it knows the history of that image, much like it knows the history of a domain or a web page. What I would recommend is if you see that it's getting traffic to that page or to that image through image search, maybe you don't want to touch it, because rotating out to a new, fresh image will reset that image, or at least that image on that article's history with Google. And so you want to be careful about that. So do your research first. Don't just change out the image because you need a new, fresh look and feel, but certainly make sure it's not getting traffic before you do that. If you do need to do a redesign, you're going to different aspect ratios, you're going to a different template size, and the hero is getting bigger or smaller, and you think this image just doesn't do you any good anymore, validate that first, because you definitely don't want to be the person that got rid of an image or traffic inadvertently. Done that, not go well. But as far as you're talking to article refreshing, 2 thumbs up on that one from my experience. We identified a whole bunch of articles in my editorial experiences at Mashable, PC Mag, What to Expect When Expecting, Everyday Health. That's the Ziff Davis group of websites. And doing article refreshes and content refreshes and looking at the competitive landscape on what is on page 1 now. what is ranking now that we're 6 months later? And writing things in an evergreen sense and exploring and going down a little further down the rabbit hole in that topic area. And adding more opportunities for engagement for the user so that their bounce rate is lower, so that their time on site is higher, certainly of high value. I absolutely agree with that tactic, and I recommend it to anyone that has editorial content that is evergreen, that you would want to refresh that. I don't know what anybody else might have said today. I'm going to go out on a limb. Depending on the seasonality of that material, you want to refresh it every 3 to 6 months if it's some of your best performing content. If you feel it's necessary after looking at a competitive landscape of how that article is performed, if it's underperforming, then maybe you want to be more aggressive. But I wouldn't say any faster than a month or two. I think it's diminishing returns toward the effort you're doing, the amount of editorial staff you'll have to keep on hand to refresh hundreds or thousands of articles. It's certainly, you want to look at your customer journey and see if you're addressing those items that have the largest monthly search volume as well.
Yeah, no, I think that seems much quicker. Again, I like with everything, right? It depends. If you're in a super competitive space where news is changing fast and your competitors are constantly updating things, then yeah, you got to kind of get into that flow. But no, I'd say looking at what our clients typically do, if it's written in an evergreen way, and it's not a super competitive space, you can go a year or 2 years, even 3 years, and you're just fine. But almost always, if once you get past that kind of time period, you either have to be very lucky that you have no competition, or that nothing changes in your industry or something, which is not too many industries left like that. But okay, no, good advice.
Yeah, and certainly once an article starts to gain traction and momentum, if it's starting to rank for more terminology, you start to see that after 3 months, an article is starting to rank on page 2 for a bunch of terms you may not have expected it to, or that were edge case terms for that article. Go back and refresh that article to add more content about those new page 2 terminologies. Or if it's ranking and you think there's another article on your website that should be ranking better, go refresh that other article and start doing some cross-linking. I often find that you've written more content since you last updated the primary article you're going to update. So go out and find some of the other articles and start doing a little bit more interlinking between the new articles you've written or refreshed, looking at your top keyword performers and your targets.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. The notion of set it and forget it with your content is definitely past.
Oh yeah.
So I want to ask you a question. It's been asked, I think, almost in every single presenter, but it has to do, I just want to get your thoughts on going after, especially with images, right? But going after the featured snippet and the knowledge graph over just trying to get that like top organic spot, and kind of what your thoughts are about that. I know Tyson touched on it, Jim touched on it, and I think even Barry did this morning. So I'm just kind of interested to see what your opinion is on the knowledge graph and featured snippet opposed to the #1 organic search spot.
Yeah, I'm going to go for bigger real estate is better. So I would certainly go after the rich results and count myself lucky if I get into that position. But understand, if I don't own it today, understand what is the content type or the situational content that is being presented in the rich snippet that I need to meet or beat. So if what's winning is an ordered list or an unordered list of items, and I don't have one, you're damn sure I better be adding that into my content as soon as possible, and perhaps a little higher in the article than I expected it to. If there are a high amount of monthly search volume about a given set of questions that are related, or the people also ask, I'd be adding those into my materials as well to try and get that rich snippet and the featured result for each featured answer, featured article in position 0, I think we like to call it. As far as the knowledge graph, that's a tough toss-up. Certainly you can get an image into the knowledge graph. It's much more difficult. You have to be highly relevant to get into knowledge graph. And I think most of us know in the SEO industry that you have to be like Wikipedia. I don't know what percentage ownership Wikipedia has of the knowledge graph, but it's got to be an extremely high percentage. So maybe you do a little bit of inception. If you can't beat them, join them. See what kind of contributions you can make to Wikipedia in a fair and balanced way. Certainly do not expect that you're going to get a link to your website from the knowledge graph if you go to Wikipedia and start adding things in there. But if you can um, you can turn the tide just a little bit toward some presence that you want to have in there that is factually relevant and adds value to the knowledge graph and the Wikipedia page, maybe you give that a shot. Images from knowledge graph can come from Wikipedia as well as other resources. There's at least 4 or 5 slots for images there usually. And I recommend you go out and give it a shot if you want to add some imagery that you have to a Wikipedia page as one of the media assets there. You could do that, and maybe you outdo your competitors or others that are there by having a better alternate text that's attached to it, a better anchor text or description that's there. So yeah, I'm pro rich results. I'm pro featured snippet. I'm interested in hearing. I was unfortunately unavailable earlier this morning on some of the other talks. What's the leading opinion or feedback to date?
So I think you hit it on the head. I think everybody said like they would take, like you said, I like how you phrased it, you would take the real estate. And I do think it's an interesting topic, right? You get all of this and it's like, if we could only be so lucky to have the featured snippet. It's not like they give that to everybody and it's like, oh no, we have too many featured snippets and not enough organic spots. So no, I think you're right in line with what everybody said is, look, like if they're gonna give it to us, we're gonna take it.
Yeah, there's something that Rand Fishkin and a bunch of others in the industry have spoken about over the last couple of years, which is the zero-click search result. Search results where nobody goes anywhere. They got their answer from the result that was in Google's SERP, and that's it. If a featured snippet is providing that and it's not me, and somebody's just not going to go anywhere anyway, I'd prefer it at least be my brand. I prefer that I be there and I be present and I be the solution provider, the answer provider, even if in the end, nobody's going anywhere. At least I got my name out there, and it may result in a little bit of brand boosting or brand traffic, direct traffic even to the website in the future. I think that's certainly the position you have to take is think of it from this, how does this do good for the company, not just how does this do good for just the SEO channel.
Right, and it can't hurt, right? If, like you said, for these zero-click results, if you're in the position, the featured snippet on that, it's got to be a good sign that Google is indexing those for what should be clicks with a high average monthly search volume. So, yeah, I think that's a great point. So, Phil, I don't have any more questions. I don't know if you do. We definitely have time for maybe one more question.
Yeah, let's do one more, and then we'll get to the prizes and the poll. And Matt, I don't know if this is I know you've only been at Getty for about 10 months. One of the fun, kind of interesting things that of being sitting where we sit, right? We see thousands and thousands of clients and what are they ordering? How long is it? What's the quality level they're expecting? What kind of advice are they giving authors? And we would never give anything away, that one of our clients is doing. But when you look at the mass, the crowd, right, the thousands of people, you definitely see some trends over time. And I wonder, with Getty Images, I think you mentioned, like million. You're not in the thousands of clients, right? You're in the millions of clients. Are there kind of things that you see over time, or things that change in terms of how your clients use stock photos or use photos in general? Is there something our audience should know? In terms of best practices that you've seen kind of something change recently, or maybe the pandemic changed something, maybe a tough question to answer, but if there are some things like that, I think that would be pretty interesting.
Yeah, there's 2 themes that we've been working toward at Getty and iStock in our imagery that we ask contributors to take photos or to create and put on the platforms, as well as because it's being driven by what the ask is from customers. There's an initiative that we call Visual GPS. You can take a look at the brand and search it out. Visual GPS helps us to take what our clients are doing and using the imagery and the studies they're doing or the way that they're implementing or what they're asking for their brand, and it communicates it out to the rest of the world on like a trend of what's going on in trending times in imagery. What we've found is that there's two trends going on in the last 6 months to a year. The first one is diversity and inclusion. Diversity and inclusion, the diversity of an image that represents a more broader landscape of the community around us. As we know, with a very politically heated times and a lot of activism that's been going on over the last year, there's been a lot of talk about what is the diversity that this image represents? What is the inclusion that we have for other communities that may not be directly in front of us but are around us that we want to include in this type of imagery? So Getty Images and iStock have had a dedicated effort, not only by our contributors, but also by the teams that run the search systems behind the material that you see, the way that we surface material, to bring more diversity and inclusion to our results than any of our other competitors. It's really been an amazing initiative. We don't just do this on a front end. We as a company have a lot of diversity and inclusion meetings and discussions and talks about how we can better represent the community in the world and the events around us in an authentic way. And that brings me to my second point, authenticity. So we believe that there is a certain place and audience for certain types of imagery versus other types of imagery. We always say that there's different groupings. There's editorial and creative. Editorial is the news. It happened on the street. It was an event that happened in time, or it's maybe a landmark or something. That's something that might be editorial at a certain time or point. It's an event that occurred. The other side of it is creative. That's when you get into the areas of, is this too stocky? Does it feel like someone is looking directly at the camera and smiling and posing? Does it look forced? Or is it something that feels authentic? And authenticity is something the team has been working on over the last couple of years to present those materials that we feel have a recognition of authenticity of lighting, of real world situations. And in the last 6 months, what is more authentic than an individual that has hand sanitizer next to their desk, or a mask that they're wearing, or gloves, or other material? Those things have been a shift in our visual landscape in the last couple of months that we are promoting in our search results internally, because when you type in grocery store today, grocery store looks much different than grocery store 6 months ago. Grocery store is completely different, with plexiglass shields and masks and bags and arrows pointing which way you're going. I don't get out that much, but I know that from the times that I have gone out, that is more authentic to what's happening in the real world today than what we have seen in the last 25 years. It is the 25th anniversary of Getty Images and iStock. We have 24 and a half years of imagery that doesn't contain that. So that's why the new refresh of this material in our system in the library and the things that are then brought to other systems are a great opportunity for people to have.
Yeah, that's a great point. We were talking a few minutes ago about, should I update that image from 3 years ago, 5 years ago? Right. I think if you're trying to present content as new or written content as new, and it's with a picture that's clearly outdated because the world has changed so much, that's not a good user experience. Not going to help you. That's great.
Yeah, there's a lot of media running on TV. I won't say any specific ads, but there's a lot of media on TV where I'm like, I can't go to a concert like that. I can't be in the stands at a football game like that. Nobody's tailgating and hugging everybody and high-fiving everyone around them. I'm like, come on, automotive commercial, catch up with. You're able to update your promos on a quarterly or monthly basis for the next holiday that's coming up for pricing, but you haven't updated the experience and the authenticity of the of what's going on in the real world today. And sure, it takes time to shoot it, to get it to market, to edit it, to do all those things. So there's websites and TVs and videos and advertisements that are shot a year ago or 2 years ago that they planned on using today. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem to work out in my mental capacity for today's mask wearing public.